preliminary remarks, perhaps more than other human rights, the right to freedom of religion or belief is exposed to misperceptions and ideological distortions, some of which even obscure the very nature of freedom of religion or belief as an international recognized human right. The discussion on freedom of religion or belief presupposes clarity about its essential features. Let me just give you a few examples. So I remember discussions also in the UN context, in the United Nations Human Rights Council, where some representatives simply dropped the component of freedom, the right to religion, not freedom of religion. Yeah, so in analogy to the right to food, with the state being in charge of healthy delivery. So simply dropping the freedom component is one of those distortions, or juxtaposing religious rights to secular rights. And some would even go so far as to turn freedom of religion into a fortress of anti-liberalism or anti-humanism, backing up draconian blasphemy, anti-blasphemy legislation, or aggressive anti-genderism. Yeah, so I mean, this is really, it's very important to start with clarifying the contours of this particular human right. So first clarification. Okay, one of the assumptions I've frequently come across is, quote unquote, FoRB, freedom of religion or belief, protects religion and promotes religious values, religious rather than secular values. Okay. Now, clarification, like any other human right, so fully in line with the human rights approach, FoRB consistently focuses on human beings. So it does not protect religion in itself, for instance, the integrity of certain belief systems against questions, against criticism, or the societal status of certain traditional religious values. No. FoRB protects human beings in their freedom within that broad area of faith, of conscientious positions, of religious practices, etc. Okay, I mean, and it's important to say that, for example, in the UN context, we had for a decade a discussion on defamation of religion, so combating defamation of religion. So, and then FoRB was turned into a protection of the honor of certain religions, rather than promoting freedom for human beings in the area of religion and belief. So FoRB, okay, the focus on human beings, which is, I mean, a hallmark of human rights, the focus on human beings does not imply a narrowly individualistic reading. FoRB also covers communitarian practices. The community is very important. It's not only secondary in status, and also the infrastructure needed for sustainable religious community life. Okay, that was the first clarification, the consistent focus on human beings, just in line with any other human right. That's the human rights approach. Second, okay, as an assumption can be the following: FoRB privileges religious over non-religious worldviews. And of course, privileges are problematic from a human rights perspective. Now, the clarification, as a right to freedom, and really one has to emphasize the freedom component, FoRB opens up the space for very diverse positions and manifestations vis-à-vis religion. While it certainly covers traditional forms of faith and also religious practice, traditional religious practice, it also includes non-traditional religiosities, for instance, religious reform movements or non-religious views, for instance, atheism. So a very famous and frequently cited statement of the UN Human Rights Committee says, FoRB covers theistic positions, non-theistic positions, but also atheistic positions. The general idea is that all human beings should enjoy respect as holders of identity-shaping convictions, so existential convictions, profound convictions, identity-shaping convictions, plus the related practices. So FoRB is also a very practical right. It has to do with food, with clothing, with all sorts of practical life issues. The full title of this human right, it's a long title, that's why we use short forms. The full title is Freedom of Thought, Conscience, Religion or Belief. And the sometimes confusing aspect is that belief also explicitly is supposed to cover non-religious convictions. So the German translation would be Gedanken, Gewissens, Religions- und Weltanschauungsfreiheit. So belief stands for Weltanschauungsfreiheit. Third assumption, FoRB is a particular Christian legacy and not applicable to some other religions like Islam. And that is something we often come across also in populist statements, also in Germany. So clarification, the historical genesis of FoRB is complicated. I mean, there's no time to really elaborate on that, but it's really complicated, full of tensions, conflicts, and paradoxes, also full of conflicts within Christianity. Until the 20th century, the Christian mainstream churches, particularly also the Catholic Church, to which I belong, the mainstream churches showed much reluctance, actually sometimes even condemnation, vis-a-vis human rights in general and FoRB in particular, while other Christian movements had long been vocal in demanding respect for religious dissent and religious diversity. So conflicts within Christianity. And today, problems concerning the full recognition of FoRB still exist in many religious traditions, in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in Islam certainly, but also in parts of Christianity. Have a look at the Russian Orthodox Church, for example. So this is not a history we have, let's say, successfully completed in Christianity. So we are still in the midst of it. At the same time, promoters of FoRB work with very different results, work in virtually all religious contexts. So it's not certainly a monopoly of, let's say, a Christian legacy or Christian perspective. So my second last assumption, FoRB, and that maybe is the most important one now clarifying that is most importantly also for the discussion that will follow. FoRB is inherently incompatible with other human rights, in particular with rights in the area of gender justice. So that is a very frequent assumption. Clarification. Now, tensions between different human rights-based concerns can arise in many ways. One example, freedom of expression, of course, can come into conflict with projects of combating racism or racist hate speech. No one would follow from that experience that freedom of expression is inherently anti-liberal. So everyone knows that it's not part of the problem only, it's more importantly also part of the solution. When it comes to FoRB, very often we see that certain uses are attributed to the very nature of this right. So, but in view also of many other conflict configurations within the broader human rights arena, we have to say, dealing with such conflicts around FoRB also is part of a normal human rights practice. And if problems or if certain conflicts occur, the purpose must always be to find an adequate, a contextual solution, a solution that does justice as much as possible to all the human rights concerns at issue in that particular situation. So, and now the most important maybe sentence in bold, it would be wrong, and that happens frequently, to turn contextual conflicts, which can always occur, into abstract dichotomies. And that is what happens in cultural wars. Abstract dichotomies is a zero-sum logic. The more we give into issues of gender, the more we lose out in the area of religious liberty and the other way around. So I will finish within my time, my allotted time. So the last assumption, FoRB is a traditional human right, which has become superfluous in modern societies. No, of course not. FoRB continues to play an indispensable role in the contemporary world. It's maybe more important than ever. It represents the insight that human beings can develop profound identity-shaping convictions in accordance to which they also want to shape their lives. So without FoRB, human rights would cease to do justice to the complexities of the human condition. Without FoRB, human rights would cease to be fully humane. Ohne Religionsfreiheit wären die Menschenrechte nicht mehr wirklich menschlich. Thank you very much.